Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to find yourself. My name is Carmen Yetzi-Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're so glad to have you all here today to talk and learn a little bit more about the Virtual Student Federal Service. I'm joined by my colleagues Cheryl Samples and Megan Kuhn, who will be walking you through lots of the different aspects of the process. But as we go through, if there's a question you don't want to leave here without getting an answer to, please feel free to throw it in that chat box and we'll do our best to get you all of the content for you to take back to your students. We are recording this session, as you might have heard, and so we'll have a recording available as well on the APSIA YouTube page as soon as technology lets me get it up after we're done. So with that, I am delighted to turn the floor over to my VSFS colleagues and to all of you to have a great conversation. Thanks so much.
Carmen, thank you so much for hosting us. We really appreciate the time and the opportunity. My name is Megan Kuhn. I'm the program analyst, and I've been with the program since April 2020. And before that, I utilized the program while I was overseas with U.S. Embassy Lima, Peru. Also on the call today is Cheryl Samples, the program manager. She joined in September from the Department of Veterans Affairs. She has a frog in her throat, so I'll be handling the conversation. We were going to have our virtual intern join the meeting, and hopefully she still can, but there's some lightning and thunderstorms happening in the DC metro area, so her internet is currently offline. So hopefully she can join us, but otherwise we'll answer your questions to the best of our ability. All right, if Cheryl, you want to pull up the slides and we'll go from there. And I think we're a small enough group that please feel free to unmute and ask your question when it comes to you, or feel free to wait until the end, whatever you prefer. So the Virtual Student Federal Service, we say, and now that most of us or many of us have been working from home for some time now, we understand that virtual work is real work. But for a long time, as you can imagine, the idea of something being remote, counting as real, was a bit, I don't know, not the norm. So our tagline is virtual internship, real experience. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a bit about the history of the program, and I believe Mara, the VSFS intern for our office, has joined, so I'll cue her up when it's her go as well. So next slide, please. Secretary Clinton unveiled what was then called the Virtual Student Foreign Service during an NYU graduation ceremony in May 2009. The intent was to pair the talents of U.S. citizen college students with the needs of U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. And accessibility was a driving factor from the very get-go, because not every student can afford to fly to Paris for an in-person internship at, say, the embassy there. So this was a way to make public service accessible to all students, regardless of location or financial constraints or family constraints. Next slide, please. So let me just see. Mara, are you on? Mara, since you're on, can you talk a bit about how it's grown, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and Mara is a rising senior at Miami University in Ohio. She is one of our graphic design interns.
Perfect, thank you, Megan. So how Vsfs has grown. So it began with 44 in-person summer interns who agreed to continue their internships with the State Department remotely when they returned back to campus in the fall. And then for the school year that just ended, we had more than 2,100 students who were selected from an applicant pool of nearly 8,000. And then, so Vsfs has grown from one agency to nearly 60. And on the next few slides, I'll talk about some of the agencies that are participating. So participating agencies include the Forest Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Agency for International Development. And then this year we actually have 6 new participating agencies for this upcoming school year, which are the United States Air Force, the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, the First Responder Network Authority, and Homeland Security Investigations and the Selective Service System. So next I'll talk about Vsfs eligibility. So how it works, Vsfs is open to US college citizen students who are rising freshmen and above. There are opportunities for all majors and all different kinds of skill sets, from things like data analysis all the way to app building and graphic design. So some projects will specifically call for graduate students, but those will be noted in the project's description. And then when study abroad becomes more popular and more of an option again, students can continue those internships while they're overseas. And then students who are graduating early, like in a December graduation cycle, they can participate with these internships. They just need to commit to staying with those internships all the way through May at the end of the school year. And then it's an average of 10 hours a week. So same with in-person internships, communication about your availability is really a key factor. So mentors are really understanding that some weeks it may be you need to cut down on your hours a little bit, such as finals week, and that sometimes you may be able to commit more hours, such as like over winter break or spring break, things like that. So just communicating with them is really key. And then if a project calls for a certain skill like graphic design or videography, it is assumed that like the student will have those tools already, unless it's noted in the project description that the agency will be providing that. And then we estimate about 10% of participants receive college course credit, and some interns previously have turned their Vsfs projects into their thesis projects as well. So next we're going to talk a little bit about the application timeline. Perfect. So students will apply on Usajobs in July. Our job vacancy posting actually went up today. And then many mentors will choose to conduct interviews, and those normally happen in early August. And then they'll begin to make their selections and work with their mentors in September. Offers are made via an automated email system, so make sure to have people be checking their junk folder because sometimes they can end up in there. And then if a student isn't selected, Vsfs will notify them in mid-September as well. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I opted for a digital internship and why I think other people should too. So we like to say that it's accessible, affordable, flexible, course credit, career development, mentors, and networks. And then just to give like a little more of a personal take to the points on the slide, my family is actually low income and I'm a first-generation college student. So having to move for an internship isn't really always an option for me given my family situation. So kind of being able to bring the work with me and like have that flexibility of like when things are going on or I have classes to kind of keep that internship 10 hours a week and like continue building those relationships and those skills while still being able to take my classes at college and be with my family and do things like that and work is really important to me. So I think it's a really great option. It allows a lot more people to have access to these types of internships, which I think is really important. And then next, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the application process.
Thank you, Mara, and thank you for your perseverance through the storm weather tech challenges. Just so everyone is aware, I threw into the chat the vacancy announcement that Mara just referenced on Usajobs. Basically, it gives students an explanation of what the program is, and then they can, if they want to apply, there's a button that they can click to apply and start the process on Usajobs. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the application process, and Cheryl, if you can please pull up the vsfs.state.gov website. There are 2 websites your students will use to go through this process. The first is our website, vsfs.state.gov. Mara, can you throw that in the chat, please? And what they'll do with that site is they will use it to determine which of the 950 projects that are available they'll actually apply for in the upcoming school year. And then once they've made those selections, they'll hop back to Usajobs to do the actual application. So that site will be pulling up momentarily. I want to highlight a couple of things. We're in the process, for those of you who are already familiar with Vsfs, you'll see that we have a new website, and with that new website comes technical challenges. So if you run into anything, please feel free to share that feedback with us. I want to highlight 2 ways that students can look at existing projects. On the top hand left corner on the hamburger bar, if they click a drop-down menu, it says all projects. Or if you go to the center of the screen, and in the next couple of days, we'll be changing the language a little bit, but it will say view projects at the center. If you click view projects, that will pull up the 950 plus projects that are available. So the first message we ask you to convey is that we encourage students to take plenty of time to look through what's available. We advise them not to wait until the last minute to look, because with more than 900 options, it's going to take them a while to find what they want to apply to. Students can apply for up to 3 internships. And if someone could unmute and Cheryl, if you can filter by agency so people can see, if someone could unmute and name an agency you'd like us to look up a project for, Cheryl will click on the agency icon, and then you can get a sense of what kind of agencies are participating this year, and we'll look up their projects. Or if you guys are shy, please feel free to write in the chat.
How about USAID?
Okay, U.S. Agency for International Development. They are our longest standing partner with VSFS. They joined our it was our 3rd school year that they joined. They have more than 80 projects available this year. So Cheryl, if you can scroll up for just a second. If students know they want to work for a particular agency, once they have filtered by agency, they could then scroll down even more, dive down even more by doing a language or a skill set filter and sort through those projects more specifically. Also, they have an option. Cheryl, if you could pick Barbados, if they know, for example, they want to do something with the Caribbean. I know that there's a USAID project, 5 of them, that pertain to the Caribbean in general and Barbados in particular. So you can do that kind of filtering to really dive deep into what you want to do. Cheryl, if you can clear out the filters for a second, I want to show languages. If someone could pick a language you'd like us to look up, whether it's, well, let us know what language you'd like us to look up. And if you could show Cheryl the options so they can see, and then someone could call out a language.
Bengali.
Japanese. Okay, Bengali or Japanese? I think Bengali would be easier. Okay, so we've got 2 projects, one from the Department of State and one from the Indian Health Service, for example, that call for Bengali. Cheryl, if you can hit the State Department project, please. I want to show them the project to give you a sense. So each project will include a summary, a description. If you can scroll down, Cheryl, required skills, as well as language. And with the language, they will specify if students need to have a speaking proficiency and or a reading proficiency, and if so, what level, as well as whether that language requirement is required or optional. Cheryl, if you can scroll back up one more time. Another key point that we want to make, if you can help us convey to students, you see this project has the title Human Trafficking Research, India and South Asia, and then it has a code state-USA hyphen, I think that's a J-52. It's really important that the students, once they identify the projects that they want to apply for, and again, they can apply for 3, that they note that code, because when they get to Usajobs, which I will talk about in a moment, they are literally going to have to pick from a very long drop-down box of 950 plus project codes. So if they can save this into a Word doc or a sticky note, that will make their life easier. The other thing that I really encourage students to do, and if you can help us convey this, is that they save the link to this project, or they export it, or they do a screenshot. That way, when they're putting together their federal resume and their statement of interest, they can reference the language used in the description. And also that way, if they're called for an interview in August, they can easily remind themselves what it is that they applied to. And I also encourage students to send the project description to their references, so the references are prepared to give a customized response about their skill set. Okay, Cheryl, if you don't mind going back to the home page of the See All Projects, I want to just show one more thing. So in addition to the filter on the top left, where you can search by agency, language, skill set, and the skill sets are more than 20 skill sets from, as Maura mentioned, coding to graphic design. Students can also do a keyword search on the top right-hand side. So for example, if you put in translation, it would pull up a handful of projects that deal with translation, which is a skill that's not specifically called out under our skills box, and there's about 20 projects there. So now that we've shown you the VSFS site a little bit more in detail, let's jump back to the PowerPoint and talk about Usajobs. So as I said, we encourage students to take time and look at our website fairly early because there are more than 950 options available to them. We also recommend that they allocate enough time on Usajobs. We estimate that it takes about an hour to get through the Usajobs process. Now, if you are familiar with VSFS, one change from last year is that this year we are not requiring students to upload transcripts. However, some mentors may ask students for an emailed copy of the transcript during the interview process. In addition, if you're new to VSFS, we don't ask for GPA, and when students apply, the application is done in a school blind format. So unless the student specifically mentions the school they attend or they use their school email address, the project mentor won't necessarily know the school of the student. And we did that with the idea of encouraging an equal playing field. Okay, next slide, please, Cheryl. So the first thing that students will need to do is to build a profile. And Mara, can you throw in the chat to everyone the link on usajobs.gov? They have a step-by-step instruction for how to build a federal profile. And then next slide, please. After building a federal profile, they will also build a federal resume. Students will not have the option to upload an existing resume, so they'll need to leave plenty of time to copy and paste if they already have a resume they want to use. As I mentioned earlier, we do encourage students to keep the project description in mind from the internships they're applying to and tailoring their resume, highlighting specific experience that is relevant to those internships. And Mara will also throw in the chat, Usajobs has step-by-step instructions on how to build a federal resume, and then they also have a listing of what to include on the federal resume. And for what to include on the federal resume, students want to definitely mention both paid work and unpaid work. Next slide, please. So we will include, again, Mara threw in the chat at the very beginning, or I threw in the chat, the vacancy announcement for VSFS. We recommend that they start there once they've decided on their 3 projects to do all of the things that we talked about. Now, they can choose to build their profile and federal resume before they go to the vacancy announcement if they want, but now that it's out, since it came out this morning, that's where they'll start to actually start the submission of the application. Next slide, please. So again, students can select up to 3 projects. And one thing I will say, I've definitely seen instances where students only select 1 project. I really recommend that they take all 3 slots because it is a highly competitive internship program. And by applying to 3, it does increase their chances of being selected. Students will rank their preference from 1st to 3rd when they are listing those 3 projects. The most important part of the application is the statement of interest. This is a 3,500 character count box, a text box. Well, they'll write out why it is they want those internships. This is their opportunity to really sell themselves, mention relevant coursework, talk about paid and unpaid work that makes sense in relation to those the internships they're looking for, mentioning, including links to their online portfolio if applicable. This is a great place to do that. And they want to address each of the internships they're applying to within that statement of interest. Next slide, please. So you all are excellent resources for your students, and we definitely encourage students to utilize career advising services and have someone look at their resume and their profile and statement of interest before they hit submit. This is just one of my personal favorite interview prep guides. It's an HR human resources blog. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, our website is vsfs@state.gov, and our email address is vsfs.state.gov. And we use the hashtag delivering diversity because I believe the latest number was 53. We just received an email. 53 Foreign Service officers are VSFS alumni. Maybe it's 53. And about a third of those come from underrepresented groups. So with that, Cheryl, you can stop screen sharing, and please feel free to unmute and ask whatever questions you have. Or if you prefer to write in the chat box, whatever you prefer.
Megan, oh, please go ahead, Erica.
Yeah, for that statement of interest, what have students who have been, do you have feedback from those managers of those projects? What have they done well to really connect with those projects? What have they done well to move ahead and be offered a position?
So in addition to doing this project, I've hired virtual interns both before I joined this team, and then I select students for our own office. And Mara, shameless plug, can you put in the link to our direct project? Because we want the best student for our office. Anyways, so I would say really just expressing in a concise way why this particular internship, they're a good fit for it, mentioning relevant experience, if they're a past virtual intern elsewhere, or if they've had relevant coursework or, related paid or unpaid work experience. And also, talking about the outcomes they achieved. For example, we're hiring for a social media influencer type role. And what I want to see in that statement of interest is the impact that they have achieved, how many engagements they've recorded since they've done social media for their, for their school or wherever they're doing social media. So impact is key. Things not to do. I've seen students put in a handful of words. I've seen students do a bulleted list. I would say neither of those are going to stand out.
Megan, since it's one profile for all three positions, if students have a diverse range of interests, do you have advice on how they can construct one statement that will touch on lots of different, it would be competitive for lots of different types of internships?
So they'll definitely want to make sure that in their federal resume, they've listed anything and everything, especially what's going to apply to those different internships. And to be clear as well, it's one federal profile and one federal resume. So they won't be building, three different resumes to go with the three different positions that they're applying to. It's one federal resume, one federal profile for the three positions. And then in their statement of interest, of course, anything that they wouldn't touch on in a resume, they would want to mention in that statement of interest.
And I'm sorry, I could kind of talk. A lot of the mentors do like if the students make a connection to, their interests and the mission of that agency. So showing that true connection, why they want, like I came from the Department of Veteran Affairs. So of course, when we were hiring interns, and we had over 600, we were looking for those interns who had a specific interest to become advocates for veterans. So if they have a connection to the agency's mission, that's always a positive.
I have a question about just getting the word out to students. I think this is a great opportunity. I'm very excited to share it with students. Do you have any, like a marketing blurb or something that you could share with us that we could just tweak and adapt to our students and send out? I'm sure from your, what you've said, I could put something together, but if you've already crafted something, would love to just be able to utilize that.
Joan, great question. And no, I did not pay Joan in advance to raise that very question. That was perfect. Mara, can you throw in the chat our Twitter, in particular, the tweet about the Usajobs, and then also the tweet about info sessions? So a couple of things. Number one, we're on social media, VSFS at state, so VSFS AT state. For Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, Mara will throw those in the chat as well. So feel free to amplify the existing messages we've placed on social media. And then we will also, I'll connect with Carmen after this session and send her our info session. It's a hyperlinked info session flyer that you can share with students, as well as our student brochure.
Thank you.
I'm curious too, once a student gets selected, and Mara, maybe you can speak best to this, how do they get the most out of this particular experience?
Sorry, I was sending something in the chat. For me, I've only been with the office, actually, this is like 1 month on the day. I started in June, so just kind of getting settled in, but I'm keeping it until next May, so I'll be here for a while. I think being open to feedback and like critique on your work has been like the biggest thing to help me grow. I'm doing graphic design specifically, so being able to send things and having like a lot of different eyes on them and like getting feedback is something I wasn't able to do a lot in my social media and graphic design roles at school. So that's actually been helping me develop, and like aligning my designs with brand voice and like brand messaging has been really helpful. And then besides that, just like getting to know everyone in the office, like even though we're all remote, I've gotten to know the other interns really well, and obviously all the staff in my office. And just being, I feel like Megan's been really gracious in like introducing me to other people. So I've been able to kind of like build my network out that way and kind of learn about different positions that maybe aren't exactly what I'm doing right now, but I'm still interested in. So being able to like talk to those people and really taking advantage of those opportunities is something I would definitely recommend.
And Mara created that fantastic background, and she actually knew how to put it up with Zoom. So this is the advantage of having virtual interns. When we talk to our federal agency counterparts and encourage them, bring on young, fresh tech talent, because they can do these things much better than we can.
I had another question. I just wanted to clarify. I think you had said there was part-time to full-time availability, and starting at 10 hours. Are most of them part-time, most full-time? Is there what is kind of the mix? And then did you say that they are all for the full academic year, correct?
It'd be part-time, with the average, we say 10 hours a week. Okay. But some weeks mentors understand students have finals, so they might have less availability, or there might be an occasional week where they have more time. But we say the average is 10 hours a week. It's meant to be a part-time internship. And then your second question, do you mind? Oh, academic year. Yes, it's intended to run the duration of the academic year. We say September to May. Some students will actually stay on through the summer, but September to May is the general guideline.
Great, thank you. And
you're welcome.
Actually, I do have one more question. You did say there was for undergrad to grad. Are most of them open to either? Or are there a lot more for grads, a lot more geared more towards undergrad?
There are definitely projects that call for graduate students. Some projects will even call for law students. And I would recommend doing a keyword search for graduate student if they only want to apply to projects that are specifically looking for someone who's a bit more mature and has a bit more experience. But in terms of our statistics, historically, the majority of our participants have been undergraduate.
Thank you.
But I will say, for example, yesterday, we had our version of the Oscars, the Virtual Interns Awards, and the intern of the year is a graduate student, and one of the runners up for intern of the year was also a graduate student. So they definitely play a very visible role.
Thank you for all this great information. I have a question about the hours that a student would work. Should a student anticipate to do these 10 hours a week during normal business hours, or can they do that whenever is best for their schedule?
Eddie? That's a great question. So sometimes we have projects, for example, in Honolulu or Tokyo, and they specifically want students on the East Coast so that the student does the work overnight while the mentor's, not in the office, and they come into the office first thing and the work is done. Sometimes project mentors will want a student in the same time zone. So it will really vary in terms of, and we ask project mentors to specify if they have a specific time zone need, to specify that in the description. And then in terms of within the time zone when that work is completed, again, the F stands for flexible. The student can talk to the project mentor and they can decide how they're going to arrange their schedule. We encourage, if a student has a very sort of rigid schedule, definitely mention that during the interview process, that sort of thing.
And just want to say our esteemed teammate, Nora Dempsey, is on. So, and she put in the chat, Megan, if you wanted to read. I don't think she could speak.
Yes, the student would basically work out their schedule with the mentor, but the F stands for flexible. And if the mentor has a specific need, they'll say it in the project description.
Can I ask a question about of undergraduate internships? So is it for all undergraduates? Do you guys specifically looking more for upperclassmen versus lowerclassmen, or will each project mention those specifics in their application, in their announcements?
Thank you for the question. I couldn't see who it asked, but thank you for that question. So it varies. I would say I see less of people asking for, say, a freshman or a sophomore, like that degree of specificity for the undergraduate. What I more see is when someone wants a grad student, or when they want someone who has leadership experience. We see a lot of mentors who want to lead. They want to hire one VSFS intern to lead a team, and they'll say they want a grad student to lead teams of undergraduates. I very rarely have seen, I want a junior, or I want a sophomore, or I want a freshman. Now, what's really great about this program is, in the case of our office, we have hired rising freshmen, sophomores, and those students have gained experience and then built up their resume to apply for the traditional internship program, which requires, at least at the Department of State, I can't speak to other agencies, but at the Department of State, the traditional internship program, the semester long, full time, you have to be at credit hours a junior. So by participating in VSFS as early as a rising freshman, we've had interns in our very own intern team be able to successfully compete with the traditional internship program when they reach that junior year credit status, because they gained internship experience while as a freshman and as a sophomore.
Megan, I'm curious about the language capabilities. I saw in the example that you gave, students didn't have to demonstrate a particular level of proficiency, but if that kind of level is required, do students have to submit additional documentation? How do they handle it if they're native speakers of a particular language? Could you unpack that bit a little bit more?
Yes, great question. So depending on the project, and there are projects calling for Burmese and Lithuanian and really great opportunities to, for example, some projects, the Foreign Service Institute, which is the State Department's language school, they're looking for virtual interns to tutor the outgoing ambassador in the language. So it'll really specify whether the project wants a native speaker or a heritage speaker, and if there is a degree of proficiency that is required, that individual project mentor will determine the assessment of the skill level. We are just the clearinghouse, the connective tissue for all the projects. It's really up to the individual mentor to do the hiring and the selection process.
And is it typically something mentors want to see in the application, a demonstration, or they'll do that as part of the interview?
Nora, could you, if you can unmute yourself, could you type in a chat your thoughts on that? While we're waiting to get a response from Nora on that, I think it's really going to, oh, Nora was saying, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Nora, when do students have to demonstrate language proficiency? In their application materials, during the interview process? They just trust the students to always be totally forthright and upcoming about where they are. Several of you are laughing because you work with students all the time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, they the mentors trust the student to be truthful in the application. They're asked at what level do they speak the language during the interview process. I'm sure that those, if it's the sort of, like, if it's one of the many projects that really requires fluency, the mentor would interview the student to show that.
Thank you.
Okay, Margaret Howard asked a question. Does VSFS participation as freshman or sophomore speed clearance? Okay, so first of all, I didn't mention this, but these are unclassified internships, so students do not receive a clearance, and their participation in VSFS does not have any impact on the clearance process if they pursue the traditional internship program or if they pursue employment.
Megan, could you talk a little bit about what some of the most difficult skills to find have been, and what kinds of students really stand out in the application process because they have those skills?
Oh, great question. And again, I didn't pay anyone to ask these questions in advance, but they're perfect questions. So every year we see a growing demand for tech skills. And because these internships are unpaid, as you can imagine, it can be difficult to compete with Microsoft and other private sector companies that pay those interns a lot of money. So for an internship. So the tech skills are definitely our hard to fill projects, any kind of tech skill. And then also we see a growing need every year more and more for graphics, visuals, videography, sort of the artsy skills. And those can also be very difficult to fill. The only project we were unable to fill for the most recent school year was a project looking for a native Laotian speaker, but otherwise all the projects were filled. And then Carmen, you had asked sort of what students with the tech skills or the art skills, how can they make their application stand out? I think if they have an online portfolio that demonstrates their abilities, or if they can talk about their achievements, what they have accomplished in terms of the the coding, how their coding skills helped resolve a problem, for example, that sort of thing.
That's great. That's really helpful. To my colleagues, I also ask, are there things that you can anticipate your students are going to ask you that you'd like to gather intel on now, or other good bits of information to help your students really stand out and shine? 950 projects is a lot, but with 8,000 apps, obviously students, it's a very competitive process. And Mara, it's great to hear that you're also building a portfolio that you can then showcase. Is that because the work is unclassified? You can then turn that around and use it when you pitch?
Yeah, I had a portfolio site prior, which was really helpful in my interview to be able to like pull that up and tell further stories beyond just the images. And then since things are unclassified, I can use the graphics that I make for this internship to like add more segments to my portfolio, which will be helpful in the next things I apply for, especially like when I graduate and look for actual jobs after graduation.
I'm curious too if there's a professional development component for the interns who are obviously all over the country and all over, in some cases, the world. Do you complement the actual work with other activities?
So we don't have a formal program for professional development, but each agency does things differently. For example, at the Forest Service, they have a weekly professional development meeting that is open to all Forest Service VSFS interns. They've got a really robust program, and they record all the sessions on YouTube so that any student who's in a different time zone or is unable to attend can watch later. One of the things that we did see happen this year is that a lot of our virtual student federal service interns who assist State Department diplomat and residents, which, by the way, Mara or Nora, can you throw the DER website in the chat? The diplomat and residents, if you haven't connected with them yet for your region, I highly recommend doing so. They can speak to things like professional career pathways beyond just internships. But anyways, the DERS virtual interns would organize professional development sessions. And then some of the interns themselves, we have some closed social media accounts for students, and they would organize sessions based on their agency or whatever they're doing for anyone to attend. So for example, one virtual intern helping Consulate Shannon and Embassy Dublin, she organized a session with early career foreign service officers that was open to all VSFS interns across agencies, for example. So a lot of students are taking initiative as well. And Carmen has put in the careers.state.gov/the DER website. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't connected yet with your diplomat and residents for your region, I definitely recommend doing so.
Everybody, we've about 15 minutes left. As I said earlier, if there's a question you absolutely don't want to leave without getting an answer to, now is a great time. Otherwise, you just have to keep listening to me, and that's no fun for anyone, really. But we're obviously all very glad to have you all here and to have you as part of our advisor network. And Ashley, it looks like you unmuted yourself, so I'm going to quit talking. No, maybe that was an accident.
One question that we do receive occasionally is whether LPRs can participate. And for now, the program is only open to US citizen college students.
And would you translate what an LPR is?
Legal permanent resident. And also Dreamers frequently ask, and for now, the program is only open to US citizens.
Are there particular efforts underway, Megan, to broaden the range of schools that send VSFS students into the pool? Is that something that you look at, where some schools have a really robust mechanism for sending students in, and others might be just beginning?
So our top supplier of VSFS applicants is UCLA, followed by a lot of the schools in DC, American, GW, and University of Maryland. So we do track that data, and we also will break it down by school size as well, because UCLA is such a large school. But We do outreach to schools across the country. We work very closely with our diplomats and residents. We try to do outreach as well to schools in U.S. territories, so not just even mainland U.S. And then we also do outreach to, we are really emphasizing community colleges this year and reaching out to community colleges. We do outreach to HBCUs, tribal colleges and universities, women's colleges. We really try to go after everybody.
That's great. And as a reminder to all my colleagues on the line, as part of the registration process, we asked whether you were comfortable with us sharing your information with Megan and Cheryl and Mara and Nora. And we will be passing that information along. And if you want to change your answer, either from yes to no or otherwise, just let me know and we can adjust it that way. And I'm glad to see South Dakota represented, Nora. That's good. We got the whole gambit from the beginning of the union to the end.
And I will say also, we have some projects, the federal government is not just in Washington, D.C. And so there are federal employees across the country, and there are some projects that specifically want students in their region. For example, the Forest Service has a historic trail. I'm going to butcher the name, something Neasy historic trail, and I think it's in several states, including Montana, and they love to have students who are in that region where the trail is physically located, for example. So that definitely helps in terms of getting students all over.
And I did want to highlight too Nora's point in the chat that about halfway through the month of July, you'll see projects that are under bid get highlighted on the site so students can see where some particular opportunities lie. And they've always been good too at letting us know at APSIA where some of those opportunities are, and we'll do our best to pass that information along to all of you too.
I would say a tip for less competitive applications, everyone and their mother is going to apply to NASA. I mean, if this had existed when I was a college student, I would have applied to NASA, right? So NASA tends to get 200, 300 plus, same with the intelligence communities. But I would say lesser known agencies like the Indian Health Service or the Selective Service or FirstNet or the nanotechnology agency, that initiative that Mara mentioned earlier. Those lesser known agencies definitely probably are receiving fewer applications than, say, ODNI or NASA, for example. So I would say, and if a student is asking, well, where do I apply to? How do I pick 3? It might be worth, if they're okay with going with a lesser known agency, let's say, really focusing on that skill set they want to build upon and grow and utilize, choosing the lesser known agency, calling for that skill set versus, say, the name brand or household name agencies, we'll say. Mara, can you read Caitlin's question, please, in the chat?
Yeah, she said, since these are unpaid, do you know of any funding sources for students who may not be able to afford unpaid opportunities?
Nora, do you have an answer for this?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry, it was, since these are unpaid, do you know of any funding sources for students who may not be able to afford unpaid opportunities?
We, as the Vsfs team, really support the move to pay interns for full-time semester work. These things are only 10-hour a week and on average, and so they are unpaid. Nonetheless, lots of students get course credit. Many students get course credit, and they wouldn't be eligible if it were a paid situation. Many students also, through their own networks and their own universities, get stipends. So it depends on the student, depends on the university, depends on the level of work and the sort of results of the internship. We leave all of that up to the students and the universities. We don't get into it. We're simply connective tissue between 3,000 internship opportunities for the federal government and students.
Are there examples of student interns finding employment with the agency they worked for once the internship is complete?
Eddie, great question. So we can speak specifically to the Department of State, and up until a couple of days ago, it's 47 foreign service officers or VSFS alumni, but I think the number has now grown to like 50, 53, somewhere around there that we can report. We are starting to track and acquire, working with our HR to acquire civil servant data. But we do know anecdotally, because we're the office that gets contacted for background checks, for security clearances and reference checks, we do receive emails all the time of students from a variety of agencies, not just the Department of State, inquiring about their wanting to confirm their participation in the internship because they've applied for a job somewhere. So we don't have hard data, but we do know anecdotally that yes, students are getting hired. And we're now that we're entering our second decade, we are trying to highlight more so our alumni who've made that transition as well. Great question.
As a follow-up to Eddie's question, can I just ask, does this, do the virtual internships help with the students who want to get the full-time semester physical internships later?
Great.
I'm going to answer that is in that it's not officially on the books, but we've seen clear evidence. So many of our HR colleagues are in touch with us frequently. There's been a discussion of badging so that someone who has successfully completed a VSFS internship, so clearly a student who works on a VSFS internship has a great result and a great relationship over an academic year with a mentor, will have opened the door to opportunity for themselves. The mentor will be advocating for that student. And we have seen, again, anecdotally, that is paying off in terms of career doors opening. So we can't tell you that there's some sort of firm statistic right now that we can show you, but we have seen it. So yes is the answer, particularly since many students used to pursue in-person internships so they would get a security clearance. VSFS internships are being pursued because the student has a passion for that work or for that internship. And that is of interest to most people when they're looking at the number of paid internships at state, because the internships will all be paid. There'll be a 1/3 the number of internships that used to be available. So they'll be more competitive, highly sought after, and clearly it will make a difference how the student has shown an interest in the work of the State Department previously.
And Giddy, my career highlight to date has definitely been when I took my civil service orientation. One of my former virtual interns, she went on to participate in the traditional in-person semester-long program, and then she joined Pathways, which is a hiring mechanism. It's an internship/hiring mechanism for a federal agency, and became a civil servant. And we were in the same civil servant orientation course, and that was definitely a career highlight.
Since Nora brought it up, can I ask an adjacent question? I had heard about the changes happening with the full-time undergrad semester-long internships. Do you know what the timing is? The last person I connected with was unclear yet if there was a plan for the timing, because normally spring semester internships would have been posted and due in June, and I've not seen the posting yet. And my understanding was they were delayed. Do you have any idea? And it's okay if you don't, because it's probably not your job to know that, but.
Yeah, I would stay abreast of careers.state.gov and see what they say.
Okay, thanks.
All right, last chance. Megan or Nora or Mara or Cheryl, you'd briefly mentioned the best email address for folks to reach out if they have questions. Would you all mind throwing that in chat one last time? Just so folks have it in case they weren't able to capture it, vsfs@state.gov. Not seeing any other questions or hands raised or folks unmuted. I do want to, oh, please, Kitty, go ahead.
Thanks. One last thing. So I'm noticing that a lot of these projects are looking for maybe 3 or 4. Are they, is that about right? I mean, I just trying to get a sense of how meaningful these relationships are going to be that they're building with their mentors. Is this going to be something where they actually have somebody that they can use as a reference in the future, and or you know, I'm trying to get a sense of how important this will be for building a student's meaningful experience. And if there's just one of like a dozen interns, maybe that's going to be less impressive than if, you know. So what's the kind of standard kind of relationship between the mentor and the intern?
I think that you should encourage your students to take a good look at the project description and see. That's why we asked the mentor, what are you envisioning? Because with 959 projects on that site right now and more than 50 agencies, it is as varied as are the personalities of the students you work with. So there's really something for everyone. Some students want to be part of a team. I think Mara has enjoyed being part of the team that we have. Some students would rather work one-on-one with a mentor. And you can see through the projects, there's no standard. One project mentor who was extraordinary this year intended to hire 3 interns to work on artificial intelligence. He ended up taking 175, and he did something huge and visionary. It just depends. And so when the students combing through to see what fits or what interests them, they should also, that's a really good point. They should look at, you know, is it going to be a big project or a little one? Will they have a chance to work with others? Do they want to work with others, or do they want to have a one-on-one with a mentor? So it's really very different. And if they get chosen for an interview, those are the sorts of the questions that they should ask themselves.
The other thing that I will say is that some projects, for example, at USAID, Agency for International Development, their most popular project, which they are continuing this year, and Mara, if you can throw it in the chat, please, it's a Black Lives Matters project as it relates to international development. That project had more than 80 applicants. They were only planning to hire 1 or 2 students and then brought on additional mentors to help select and then also manage, because they decided to hire 20-something interns. So that's gonna, you know, things could also change as well on that front.
Yeah, and 2, I just want to add right now, there are 3 other interns that work on our team. And I feel like that hasn't really taken away from my experience, but that's also a small team. But in a previous job I've had at my university, I worked on a team of 24 other essentially interns. And I feel like in that case, it is what you make it. Like, I went out of my way to connect with our supervisor and like connect and like make her a mentor in my life. And she was actually someone that wrote letters of recommendation when I was applying for internships this summer. So I feel like it also, like, as much as like size can impact like your opportunity for those one-on-one connections, it is kind of up to you to like build your own network and like put yourself out there to like make those relationships. So I don't think that's necessarily a hindrance. In having the other interns on our team this year has like helped me be better at what I do. Like, having other people's opinions and insights and other experiences from all over the country has really helped me. So I feel like it is kind of what you make it and like the attitude you go into it with. So I feel like as long as you find a project you're really passionate about, like those kind of things will line up for you.
Thank you all so much. Megan, Nora, Mara, Cheryl, any last bits of great advice before we send our advisors off, lit with the fire to hopefully engage their students on in this project?
Don't wait until July 30th to apply, because it's the website. Our website has a lot of content to go through, and then Usajobs takes about an hour as well. So to the extent that students can not procrastinate, that would be great.
Something I'm sure the advisors have never ever said to their students about turning things in more than 1 minute before the stroke of midnight. Well, thank all of you. Thank you to our colleagues from VSFS and to all of you advisors for being a part of this session. I put in the chat, there's always more information at apsia.org and then our website for the Public and International Service Advisor Network. And we will be hosting a number of other webinars throughout the summer to introduce you or deepen your knowledge of particular fellowship and other programs. So we really look forward to seeing you at those as well. A recording will be up at the APSIA YouTube page pretty soon. And we're always here to be a resource and a connection point for all of you and your students. So thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are.
You're the
Thank you
best.
so much.